Hi, welcome or welcome back. My name is Eleanor, and today is momentous. I know I usually say that every week, but this day really is momentous because I have found a book uh, written in prose about poetry that is finally the book that I was looking for, and finally the one book that I can absolutely recommend to you if you're interested in reading and enjoying more poetry next year in 2025. I recommend a book by Brenda Hillman called Three Talks, only came out late this year. And you might remember her name because she was the editor of the Pocket Emily Dickinson that I've been talking about. Now, the three talks are each titled with two words, and all six words have the letter M to start them off. So it's already quite pleasing to me because I like order in my books, especially when they're books about poetry, which is, quite disordered in and of itself. The first talk, is metaphor and metonymy. Then it's meaning and mystery. And lastly, but not least, it's magic and morality. Now, starting from the beginning with metaphor and metonymy, don't be You know what? I was going to start with the whole definition of metonymy, which I find very interesting. That can wait for later. What am I even doing? Let me explain to you what was it, the essential element of these three talks that I found so intriguing. I would say it's her ability to describe the unknowable nature of a poem and of poetry in general, and encourage you as a new reader or an experienced reader to delve into it despite the unknowable. It's an extraordinarily encouraging book. Why her talks are so different is, I think, first of all, the tone. She's able to create a tone that is part autobiographical and personal, part a truly wise professor of poetry material, but in a very readable, digestible way. And on top of that, an ability to laugh at herself, not take herself too seriously, and show rather than tell that the practice of reading poetry is something that is available for everyone at the deepest level. She calls it a bouquet of considerations. It's not going to be a huge textbook. I mean, I downloaded it on my e-reader because I wanted it instantly. I didn't want to wait. But I'm pretty sure it would look like a smallish book. It felt like I was reading it rather quickly. But it really begs to be read and again and again. And I already reread it. So the two words that make up each title of the three chapters, she calls them the dizygotic twins in our imagination. So it's those sort of brilliant ways of putting together the information, choosing the information, and then how she manipulates it to be just so attractive and understandable. She's talking about quite complex issues of understanding language and accepting the mystery and the unknowable that's in poetry, but she's using a very welcoming manner to do it in. I found it fabulous. Now, going back to what I was excited about to talk, to talk further about the metaphor and metonymy. So we pretty much know what metaphor is, but she goes into an explanation about how the origin of the word metaphor means to take something and go beyond. So you're going beyond reality and creating something linguistically that's moving forward beyond. Metonymy is what's used by poets to ground the poem in reality, and the two combine. It's very refreshing. She never once mentions the word simile. She only mentions metonymy. Now you can look it up, and I'll try to explain it just to see if I can do it. Metonymy, it's a slippery definition. You know what? Let me check my notes. It's the substitution of part for a whole, or the substitution of something that's nearby to something else. So, for example, my heart is full. That means I have a lot of feelings. Yes? We know that whoever's speaking or writing doesn't mean literally the heart, but it's not a metaphor. It's not metaphorical, it's metonymy. Lend me a hand is another one. She calls it an impulse of realism. An aspect or category of metonymy is synecdoche. I always want to pronounce it synecdoche. It is not. It's synecdoche. Okay. It's like her example for synecdoche is baseball. We need another bat. We need another glove or mitt. You can tell I don't know baseball, but in any case, it's, the suits are coming in tomorrow, something like that. Or maybe that's more metonymy than synecdoche. No, I think that's synecdoche. You see, it's very slippery, but it's definitely not metaphor. It's grounded in reality. It's you know exactly. It's like a 30 head of cattle. Like you're not seeing that the heads are not, just in a ghostly manner, just floating. You know that the reference is to the cow, but it's certainly not a metaphor of a cow. It's metonymy. So very, very interesting and refreshing way to look at how poets use language. And another fascinating thing she says, among many things, in this first talk, is she just quietly says, and always remember, she says, I'm paraphrasing, that you can write beautiful poems without metaphor and metonymy as well. And I've never heard anyone say that before. It's okay. You can relax. Okay. So the first talk really hooked me in. I should say throughout the book, she uses many different examples. So she'll give a poem, mostly short poems, by a variety of different writers, several of them in translation, different backgrounds. And so again, I think, let's say you're new to poetry. I mean, in my mind, this is the person that I'm speaking to, but you might be anyone, so you're all welcome. But in my mind, the person I'm speaking to is someone who likes, let's say, quite strange literary works of prose fiction or non-fiction, really, and is looking to enter the world of poetry. So here is something to entice you in, a way of looking at the language of poetry that might excite you as a new linguistic exploration and discovery for you. Maybe you're a little bit bored with the books you're reading at the moment, of books of prose that you're reading at the moment. And then, I counted them in the first talk alone. There are 9 poets mentioned. Their poems are shown and discussed. So this is already an introduction to 9 different poets. Now, the second talk is titled Meaning and Mystery. And there were 1, 2, 3 parts of this talk that were so wonderful to me, so astonishing, so helpful, so validating. I think I'll just quote from them. Before I do, let me also say, mixed into this whole book are autobiographical details of her life that are really interesting. Some personal photos. There's an adorable photo of her as a young girl, but they all have meaning within the subject matter. There are photos of there's a bird, there's a butterfly, there's a fungus. There are photos that remind you that she's a real person. She's not up on a pedestal somewhere giving a lecture from on high. It's giving you context. So now continuing. Okay. She talks about meaning and mystery as being another dyad of poetry. So you had metaphor and metonymy, and now the next dyad is meaning and mystery. She says meaning and mystery are also forces of imagination, just as metaphor and metonymy are. She says what is intended and what is held in secret. Meaning, what is intended. Mystery, what is held in secret. Not saying that the poet is keeping secrets, but what is being kept secret fundamentally by language, because language always denotes something else, but can never convey 100% of that something else. They make fine dance partners, she says, which I really like. Now, she says difficulty. So when you say a poem is difficult, it's not. It's mysterious. And she says, comfort poems, when COVID happened, people would call her endlessly and email her and ask her for recommendations for poems of comfort. And she said the whole issue is vexed. It's a vexed issue because poetry is... Good poetry is mysterious poetry, and that doesn't always necessarily comfort you in the way you think poetry is going to comfort you. And it is in its uncomfortable situation. She also says at one point, poetry is not decoration. It's not only used, you're not supposed to just take it out for, a wedding or a 50th birthday party or something like that. But, not that there's anything wrong with that if you do it, but there's so much more to it. If you're really interested in what poetry is, go beyond that. Challenge yourself. So she says, and I quote, "I'm interested in the moment in a poem right before it is understood." Right before it is understood. Here's your key. When you get to a point in a poem and you don't quite understand it, think of Professor Brenda Hillman saying that you've just reached the most interesting point. She also says a poem is a box. You can see the front corners, but the back corners are always hidden. You're not dumb. You're not making a mistake. You're not missing something. Now, this is the bit I just adore. She says that she's done a lot of question and answer sessions in her time. She is one of the elders of American poetry. She is wise. Yeah, she's been writing for decades and decades, reading for decades, teaching for decades and decades. She says she usually will get a question saying, why can't poets say things directly? So the first thing she answers is, what do you mean by directly? See, that's what poetry does. That's what poets do. They make you question every manner of language that you come across. Then she has 3 additions. She says, first, I will advise the person who asked the question that it seems that their poetry education was incomplete. That's the first one. Second one, modernism is 100 years old, and their tired teachers chose poems that would have impact after one reading. This is, to me, the absolute truth. The issue is that the education that we get is usually not able to teach us these complexities of poetry and of language. And she's not pointing fingers. That's why she says the tired teachers. It's tiring. And the students generally don't want to learn. But if you are interested in poetry, now's your opportunity. Now's your opportunity to educate yourself properly. And also, I should say that what she's referring to, I believe, when she says modernism is 100 years old, is that it's time to stop complaining. She talks about her friendship with a poet who unfortunately passed away a few years ago, called C.D. Wright. They're both huge poets, huge teachers, and they were very close friends. And she says, and I quote, this is from the book. She's referring to C.D. Wright. She was a close friend, and we often discussed our impatience with overly reductive rubrics and categories in contemporary writing, including the impulse to label modernist inflected poetry in disparaging terms. I wish that I had been one of their friends and I could have joined them in these discussions. Moving on, the third talk, magic and morality. Honestly, when I came up to those 2 words, magic and morality, it made my neck itch. I'm not interested in talking about magic personally. Morality definitely made me very defensive immediately. I think we're all aware that one person's morals may not coincide with another person's morals. What is she talking about? Okay. I gave that chapter a second and a third reading because I wanted to be sure about what I understood of it, how I understood it, and what I got out of it. And she surprised me because, and I quote, this is what she wrote, "In political action, you have to be receptive and you have to let go of outcomes. That principle stays with me as a poetic statement too." Well, I'll get behind that 100%. You have to be receptive. You have to let go of outcomes. I'm against extremism. So I found that very refreshing. also, I'll quote this also. In these moments, she's talking about 2020, I think. I'm not sure, but she says, in these moments, poetry seems to retain an impossible strength, and it has everything to offer a culture that fattens itself on retaliatory violence. So instead of fattening yourself on retaliatory violence, she says, try to think deeper. Try to be more receptive, to let go of outcomes. It's an interesting subtlety. She encourages the reader to question subjectivity and ego, and to abide in doubt. These are quotes from the book. To abide in doubt. Her view that poetry has a place in politics, has a place in activism, is both inspiring and scary. Because what can be used for good can also be used for evil. And how do you really know all the time? Sometimes it's not clear. It'll be interesting for me to see if the poetry community can do this. I'm talking about kind of the American poetry community, because for some reason that's what I'm fascinated with. Yeah, I mean, after all, poetry can be a fantastic way to convey propaganda. There's no doubt of that. Speaking to a friend who, remembered communism under the Soviet Union, and the poems they were taught at school. So, yeah. In a way, it's actually, now that I think about it, how wonderful that Brenda Hillman chose that for the last chapter in the book, for the last talk, because it leaves you with something to really get your teeth into and really think, where do I stand as a poetry reader, and what sort of poems am I looking for, and how is it going to affect my outlook on life? And how is it going to affect, will it affect society? I don't know. Let's wait and see. So, yeah, what I did was I really felt instinctively that this book was just what I needed at this time, just as we're about to go into, this new calendar year, 2025. What sort of poetry reader am I going to be? And so I went back to my poetry shelves, and my eye was drawn to this book I had bought. At one point, one teacher I had said to me, "Oh, you must check out Jean Valentine. She's an American poet." And because I'm a very good student. I always go and find the text that is recommended to me by, this is how I idolize my teachers. I bought this book, Door in the Mountain, New and Collected Poems, 1965 to 2003 by Jean Valentine. In the meantime, a new collection has come out. I think after she died a few years back. So I'm in two minds about whether I want to, buy that because it has the most recent poems in it as well. But this was a book that, I have to read Jean Valentine. I immediately opened it, and I couldn't make head or tail out of it. It didn't speak to me. I couldn't get into it. So with keeping in mind what the gorgeous Professor Hillman, I just want to call her Professor Hillman out of respect and love and admiration, what she has written and what I got out of her book, 3 Talks, I opened it again, and it opened for me. It opened for me because I expected mystery, and I found mystery, and I knew, okay, this is what it's about. And so I read one poem and the next poem, and I just kept going on and on. Previously, a few years ago, when I bought this book, and I thought, I'll start close reading every poem, and it just didn't work, because I was trying to find that, I was trying to force the key. And in this regard, I feel that I have proven to myself that Professor Hillman's attitude and her recommendations work in a practical sense, and I am hoping that they might work for you too. Just in case, I thought I'd make this video. I'll tell you one other thing that was really weird. I thought to myself, Brenda Hillman's friend was C.D. Wright, and I have one of her books that is about poetry, and it's this one. It's got a very long title. It's an excellent book, and I decided just to look at the contents page, and I suddenly saw, she writes about Jean Valentine, and then she writes about Jean Valentine again. I'll tell you how many they're sort of like little tiny chapters she has, and throughout the book sprinkled are chapters on Jean Valentine. By pure happenchance, I picked up this book, and by pure happenchance, then I went to this book. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 little chapters on Jean Valentine, and the last one, I have extra stars on it. Let me remind myself. Yeah. She has so many little chapters because she's trying to describe what Jean Valentine is doing in her poetry without saying what the poems are about, because you can't really say that because it's so mysterious. That's why she has so many little chapters, and each one is better than the next. Here we go. She says this, for example. This is C.D. Wright on Jean Valentine. Emotion is never dodged, only the details. The reader is led to a private space and left there by herself to contemplate her own reprehensible acts. Now there's an interesting review of a poet. Or she says, she's mindfully open. She's talking about Jean Valentine. A dreamer, a quiet, wide-awake child writing a letter to an imaginary friend. C.D. Wright, may her memory be blessed, is showing me the way into Jean Valentine's poetry. To be absolutely clear, what happened to me with Jean Valentine, reading her after this experience, was that I gave myself permission to feel and notice my feelings as I was reading the poem. And then remember that feeling and realize that every time I read this particular poem with this particular combination of words, I feel that same feeling. That's art. That's art. Just as you might stand before an abstract painting. C.D. Wright talks about Agnes Martin, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure, but just as you might find yourself accepting your feelings when you're in front of an abstract painting, being in tune with your feelings as you're reading a mysterious poem, it is an experience that I think every reader should have, and no one should try to take that from you. Emancipate yourself and make your own decisions. And I really, really look forward in 2025 to having more more of my favorite booktubers who are so accepting of the strangest writing in prose. I want them so much to talk about the strangeness of poems, poetry books, because basically I'm sitting in the sandpit and all my friends are on the slide and the swing, and I just want them to come to the sandpit with me. You don't have to commit to a year of booktubing about poetry, but I would I'm doing this out of, it really is for selfish reasons. I need to have people to watch and to listen to who can say, oh my God, I felt this, or I thought this when I was reading this poem. I'll be like, oh, I thought this and felt this. Oh, this is similar. Oh, this is different. How interesting. I want more people to play in the sandpit with me. But I'm happy to go to the swings and the slide too. There's nothing wrong with those. And I'm definitely going to be there. The whole playground is there for us. I don't know where did that metaphor come from? Oh my God, this is a shocker of an ending. In any case, thank you for listening. Yes, I hope you have an amazing end of year. I hope 2025 brings us many wonderful books in all genres. And don't forget, the only real property is the property of the mind. Bye-bye.